Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the first session of our three-part holiday webinar series. My name is Erin Hildreth. I'm part of the responsibility.org team. And before we get started, I wanted to let you know that we are recording this session today. It will be available on the responsibility.org YouTube page later today or early tomorrow. And we'll also send out the links to all three of our webinar sessions after the conclusion of the third webinar session. And the third webinar is on December 16th. Everyone is on mute at this time. So if you have a question, please enter it in the Q&A box, which is right next to the chat box. This will allow us to address your questions easily and go ahead and ask them whenever they come up. The mission of responsibility.org is threefold. We work to eliminate underage drinking. We work to eliminate drunk driving and work with others to eliminate all impaired driving. And we work to empower adults of legal drinking age who choose to drink to do so responsibly. Over the last 30 years, we've made great progress on all three of these missions. We have not done it alone, because we all have a seat at the table of responsibility, and responsibility starts with each one of us. Responsibility.org is all about conversations that lead to a lifetime of healthy alcohol choices, but not every conversation is about alcohol. We have a social responsibility as well, to be good citizens and parents, to be good humans, and to raise our kids to be the same. Happy holidays, everybody. So the last almost 2 years have been trying, to say the least. Don't get me wrong, there is so much that we should and are grateful for, but it has been a struggle. We're back to school. That's exciting. It's not back to normal, and it's not even back to the new normal. It keeps changing, and things are changing every day, even now, as we all watch the news. Kids and adults alike have struggled with mental health issues, isolation, and getting back into socialization. There are conversations to be had. There are lessons to learn. And as parents, there are behaviors to model. It all starts and ends with responsibility. And we want this holiday season to be merry and bright. And in order to do that, we need to add in responsibility. So we're really excited to bring this holiday webinar series to you, starting with today's session about kids and parenting, especially as we navigate the next couple of weeks. So let's get started. I would like to have our panelists introduce themselves. They've been very generous with their time today and expertise. So we will start with Monica.
Hi, everyone. Excited to be here with you today. My name is Monica Burns. I'm an ed tech and curriculum consultant, a former New York City public school teacher, and I host professional development for educators both in person and virtual, and run the blog classtechtips.com. So looking forward to today's conversation.
Thank you. James?
Hello, everybody. James Edmond, principal at Woodside Elementary School, Hamilton School District in Sussex, Wisconsin. Also on the board of directors for the National Association of Elementary School Principals. I'm excited to be a part of this panel and with all of you here today.
Thank you. Melody?
Hi, everyone. I'm also very excited to join everyone here today. My name is Melody Fananapazir. I'm a school psychologist and positive discipline parenting coach in Sacramento, California. And I work with families and parents and students to build some tools and lifelong skills and characteristics. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. And Katie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Katie Friedman. I am a board certified pediatrician. I work in the emergency room, and I'm also a medical educator. I educate through my platform, Forever Freckled, which is a blog I share with my sisters, and I am one of our board advisor members, so here at responsibility.org. And I'm very excited for today. I think we'll all learn a lot from each other, and hopefully we can teach, and prevention and education is key. So I'm excited to be part of the panel.
Wonderful. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the floor to the moderator of today's webinar, Brent Almond. Brent is a graphic designer, a writer, husband, and father. He blogs at designerdaddy.com and has been part of responsibility.org's parent influencer team for the past 2 years. We're honored to have him here. We're honored to have all of our panelists. And of course, we're honored to have all of you. Brent?
All right, thanks everybody for being here. As the father of a 12-year-old, I'm gonna be taking lots of notes and I'm really excited to learn a lot. The first question off the bat, as Erin was saying, kids are back in school, but we're not back to a new normal or really any kind of normal. What are you seeing that concerns you the most? Monica, why don't we start with you?
Absolutely. We know that this has been a very different school year. The school year we're currently in feeling even different than last year and the year before. And there's a lot of pressure right now to play catch up or to feel like we need to be where we would be if things felt different this school year. And I think that children are feeling that pressure around them, even if it's not directed towards them explicitly, but just feeling that sense of tension and pressure both inside the classroom and outside the classroom. There are definitely places that are making a great move towards putting social emotional learning as a high priority, but not everywhere. And so right now I find that some of these challenges are around balancing high quality screen time, for example, or using devices in a way that is really productive and sparking conversations with peers and then at home with families. But there's plenty of opportunities to build connections now. And as we are thinking back to what might feel more normal moving forward, there's definitely some implications there for making decisions in the future.
James, did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
Well, so I'm going to speak from a kind of a unique situation in that we've been in school in person here in the Hamilton School District the past 2 years. So when we're looking at what a lot of schools and school districts went through, what they're experiencing now, perhaps being back in school, is their first go at the new normal. And we're kind of in our second year of trying to navigate this. And we all thought in this district, having gone through last year, in person, masks, quarantining, all those things that made the school year, we were so happy to be back together, but it wasn't normal. And it was very stressful for families. It was stressful for kids because we would contact trace, and kids would be out of school for periods of time. Sometimes they'd come back and they'd be back for a couple of days and they'd be close contacted again and then be out again. So that uncertainty of being in school, that whole school year made it really one filled with anxiety for both staff and for students and families. And so when we got to this year, like all of you, we hoped coming into this summer that this was truly going to be a normal school year. And it's been anything but. We've been trying to do school in a normal way, but still having the same challenges of COVID. So the anxiety is still there. It's real. We've been a PBIS school for my 14 years of being a principal here. And this is where I really see that foundation of social emotional learning as being really important. Like Monica mentioned, we've spent so much time understanding that if we aren't caring for the social emotional needs, the anxiety, the fear that the students and their families are having, the achievement, the academics aren't going to come. So it's really important to work on building resiliency with our kids here in school and taking the time to make sure they understand that we're in this together in order to help them navigate the world, because it's still, once again, not a normal place for them to be. So we've focused a lot in small group work, whole class instruction, really focusing on helping kids get what they need just to feel excited to be back in school and to feel like life eventually is going to get back to a place where they feel safe and happy.
Yeah, you mentioned social emotional learning, and that leads me to the next question. And we've heard so much about mental health issues for families during the pandemic. How can we as parents and caregivers take steps to protect kids of all ages, especially with the continuing uncertainty and the holidays coming upon us? Melody, why don't you share something with us?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, just to continue on with what Dr. Edmond was saying, when children feel better, they do better. So if there are some emotions or feelings that they might be experiencing, it's really good to take some time to validate those emotions. Sometimes out of love, we like to help as parents and say, it'll be okay. We're all going to get through this, and give that sense of positivity and hope, which is definitely valid. But it also helps to validate how they're feeling, because that might be really big in their world, even if we feel like it might not be that big of a deal. So that opens that door of conversation to really say, I can understand how this could be difficult for you. Can you tell me more? And ask those really curious questions. Especially with breaks coming up. I think we've experienced it a little bit with this past holiday as well, but it's really good to bring some certainty. The brain does not like uncertainty. So kids really thrive on routine. So try to still implement some type of routine, some familiar traditions, setting up some structure with some freedom. So asking them, well, what would you like today to look like? Let's try and block that out a little bit. And the more we involve them in that, the more accountable and easygoing it might be, but the brain will also feel better. So it'll minimize those anxious feelings, knowing that there is still some structure during the holiday time, or even just at any moment, just involving them more with routines, traditions, some fun activities too. And then just checking in with them regularly. And one really easy way to do that is to involve yourself in their interests. So if they're watching a show or they're doing something with friends, ask some questions, ask to give them a ride there or take them, because it's usually in those moments where things are at ease that they might feel better about opening up about certain things too. And also utilizing that time for some more connection.
Yeah, I like that about reinforcing importance of traditions. That's such a holiday thing, but now it has such extra weight to it. Dr. Katie, how about you? Do you have anything? I'm sure you have plenty of wisdom for this topic.
Yeah, so I have a unique perspective in the sense that I'm in the emergency room. So a lot of times when we do have children that are coming, especially during this pandemic, we are dealing with a really large surge of kids suffering from different mental illnesses, whether it's, alcohol abuse, depression, suicidal ideation. So, we kind of see those repercussions of what the pandemic has been doing to our children, especially in the adolescent population. And I would reiterate that, for me and what I'm seeing, communication and opening those lines of communication with your children early on is really, really imperative. And you see that difference between a parent and a child, and that how communication works and how it can work against us. And, when a child is at a point where they are so sad that they're, are suicidal, or at a point where they're depressed, it's really important that, you open those lines of communication early on. Children, especially adolescents, tend to be they don't like to communicate as much with their parents. They really lean on their friends to talk a lot. So, and sometimes you might find them in a moment or a time where they don't want to talk, but just saying to them and opening that line and saying, hey, listen, and humanizing yourself as a parent and saying, I know that I'm feeling really sad today. Like I woke up, I'm feeling overwhelmed. So I can't even imagine how you're feeling. I just want you to know the first thing I say to a patient when they're going through those emotions is I want you to understand that you're not alone, and that many children and many people are going through those feelings and experiencing the same thing that you are: the stress, the anxiety, the depression, the sadness. Those are feelings that you are not alone in, and let's work it out together. And if you are having those emotions or you are having those feelings, it's so important that you feel like you can come to me as your parent and talk to me, because I think opening up that channel and making sure that they don't feel intimidated and they are able to talk to you is really, really imperative. And unfortunately, when we see it, it's when that child has kind of closed down and maybe that line of communication isn't 100% there.
Yeah, definitely holding on to that communication aspect with my tween, who's about to get into that I don't want to talk to you anymore phase. James or Monica, do you have anything else you want to ask? Go ahead.
I was just going to add it. I think Melanie said, I think taking the time to find those moments when it's not a high emotional moment, like in the ER, everything's very high emotion, right? but taking those times to open up those lines of communication in situations that are less stressful for them. Like, for instance, if a child has a temper tantrum, you're not really going to teach them that much in that moment, but maybe 6 hours later, when you're doing the highs and the lows of the day, that's the time when they're more calm and you're able to communicate. So I think someone had mentioned, like in the carpool line, or when you're taking your child to a sporting event, getting engaged with them with what they're doing in those moments when there's less stress and less emotion is really important to open up and to talk to them and open that relationship up in the moments when there's not a lot of stress and emotion.
Right, definitely. Does anyone else have anything else to add on this?
Well, I think as professional educators too, we've become really good the past year and a half at just listening in a variety of ways, whether it's been staff members, students, or families who've called for a variety of needs or concerns. We do a lot of listening, and that's really important because, 9 times out of 10, somebody just wants to be heard, right? And it's not about providing a solution. If you have one and they ask for it, absolutely give it to them. But with a lot of our kids, they just want to be listened to and guided. And one of the sayings we have here at our school, and we focused a lot on selflessness versus selfishness over the past couple of years. And if you've paid attention to our world, and believe it or not, our kids, as little as kindergarten through 4th grade, and that's my school, they're on social media, right? So they see the world, the state of the world that they're living in. We've spent a lot of time really trying to get them to understand what it means to be selfless. And we call ourselves a family here at Woodside. And I tell them that family stands for forget about me, I love you. And so we kind of stand on that as our foundation of what we do and how we operate. And so helping kids understand like their greater place in this world and how they can contribute to be there and help for others kind of helps with that whole mental health component as well, because they realize we're in this together. I'm not alone. And if I find somebody, they're going to listen. And you can teach that to kids who are 5 years old all the way up through 11 years old and build that community of trust and support. And we have to have kids that understand that they're not alone and families that understand that they're not alone. And the holidays can be stressful for a lot of people. So kind of reinforcing that message of we're in this together is critical.
Yeah, I like that, the definition of family. I'm sure I'll try to use that again sometime. Monica, do you have anything you wanted to share on this?
I love that definition too, or thinking about that acronym there. And, fostering connections over the holidays is so important for children who may not have a lot of people to talk to, or when they come home, or really want to continue those conversations from a classroom setting. So even setting up plans or staying connected with other members from a classroom community to set up even virtual get-togethers, if it's playing a video game or checking in on FaceTime, and, setting that schedule, like Melody mentioned, something that is really doable is important, right? An attainable goal for a schedule. And even if you are examining what it looks like for students or children to participate in tech-friendly activities at home, right? All those things, if we can set a schedule or norms for a family that everyone can stick to, those attainable goals are also things to consider.
And now that we are deep into the holiday season, or that's not that deep, but it seems like we've been here for a while. What can parents do to address safety when it comes to talking to kids about things they might see? Melody, how about just something you want to share about this?
Sure. Yeah, so just to, again, continue on this conversation about conversations, one really helpful tool to kind of be proactive to doing that and setting up some agreements, some rules, some expectations are to have family meetings, just regular check-ins and times where they know they can express some concern, they can talk about what they're feeling, and also implementing some compliments, some uplifting moments where you see that they are actually doing great things, and having some family fun time involved in there too. But if they know that there's a space where they can talk about things, then we can minimize trying to figure things out in heated moments, because it's really difficult if you get a panicked phone call and you get into this fight, flight, or freeze mode, and we're in a stress moment, we can't problem solve during that time. It's not a time where we're even able to activate that thinking skill. So we're not necessarily going to be thinking rationally, we're going to be thinking emotionally. And so to try to think about an exit strategy, or if you get a phone call from your kid or you don't, or you find something out, it's much harder to problem solve during that time. So it's really helpful to have it kind of proactively taken care of beforehand, talk about scenarios, and also letting them know you can always contact me, even if you feel like you can't, and coming up with that plan in advance so we can avoid trying to make a solution happen in a heated moment. So family meetings do not have to be very long. They can really just be, a check-in at the end of the week on a Friday afternoon or a Wednesday evening, even over dinner. But if they know that they can count on a time, or even posting a little agenda on the fridge, and let's add that and talk about that. What are some fun things we want to do, but what are also some conversations that we want to have? And really what this helps with is letting them share their voice and concern too. It's not a time for lecturing. It's, again, like mentioned before, a time to really listen. So kind of close our mouth, hear what's going on, and then process it together as a unit, and really hear what they have to say and involve them as much as possible, instead of pushing those rules, opening a question and saying, well, what do you think would be a good idea to do in that situation? And sometimes, most of the time, they come up with some really great ideas.
And Katie, and working in the ER, I'm sure you have lots of insight in regards to safety. What can you share on this topic?
Yeah, so I think those are all excellent speaking points. And I think that it's so true. We have to involve our children and understand that they have a voice. And when they give you an idea and they feel like they're part of the process, they're less likely and they're more likely to cooperate, and they're more likely to engage in healthy habits. I think it's also important, I always speak to my children in the ER about this, and as I educate, is to, really remind children about, their own health and their physical health, and that their body is their temple, and that start to practice healthy habits early on. I'm talking very early on in the toddler years, all the way up. You want to establish their relationship with their own body and start practicing self-limitation. Like I always talk to my kids and I say, if you had a plate of 10 ice cream sandwiches, if you ate all those, maybe you were allowed to eat all 10 of them, but if you did, maybe your belly would hurt and you would get sick, and there's consequences to that, and kind of giving it to them on their level, the lessons that they can understand and absorb. But really just setting that precedence that they're going to be responsible for their own body, and good decision making starts at a very young age. And as they practice it, they get better and it gets easier, so that when they are adolescents and they do get older, it becomes easier to make those good decisions because they've had some self-restraint and they've been practicing that for a long time. The other thing I would say is, don't ever underestimate the messaging that you're sending to your child with self-modeling, and the way that you have a relationship with alcohol and the way that you're sending the message to them, right? So if you're in a very stressed out situation and you grab a glass of wine and you're drinking and you're like, oh, just wait, I need a glass of wine first, you're sending them the message that the wine is helping your situation, or that that's becoming a crutch, or that's something that's solving your problem. And whether you mean to send that message or not, it is. So maybe it's asking your husband to pour a glass of wine, or your partner to pour a glass of wine at the dinner table. And it becomes more of a message of, I'm enjoying a half a glass of wine with my meal, versus this message that it's solving your problem, or it's being used as a crutch for stress. So the way that you communicate to them and the way that you're messaging them, your relationship with alcohol, your relationship with stress, is really, really important. And I have found that in this pandemic, we all are kind of struggling because we're on top of each other. And that's becoming even more important, that the modeling good behavior is very, very, very imperative when it comes to the way your child's looking at the way you manage your stress, and the way that you cope in your relationship with alcohol in those types of situations.
Yeah, also in relations to DUI arrests and suicides and things like that seem to always increase around the holidays. How do those numbers also relate to COVID and the pandemic?
I think these children are also dealing with a lot of stress in the sense that they're, we forget that they are scared themselves of the virus, and or they probably have a loved one and or a family member that has directly been affected with COVID. So, their stress level is already relatively high. And I think that this holiday season, similar to last holiday season, we're going to see a rise in DUIs, suicide attempts. I mean, I know I can tell you just the trends in the pediatric emergency room alone, our mental health cases are significantly increased during this pandemic. So again, I know that we continue to reiterate this all in our different backgrounds, but communicating with your child and making sure that they can come to you when they're feeling those sense of sadness, making them feel at your level and let them understand that those are normal feelings that you're feeling as well, and allowing that communication to occur is so important, because you don't want to get to a point where they shut you out and they feel like they're unable to tell you the way that they're feeling. It's imperative that they can communicate to you as their parent. You have to make sure that you're their safe person. And in those high emotional states, as we said, it becomes less available to us for that person to feel safe. So you need to establish that early on before you even get into those high emotional, situations. Like I always tell my children, you're never going to get in trouble for telling me the truth. I want you to come to me with any problem that you have. We will work through it as a family. I don't want you to feel like you're going to get in trouble. I'd rather you come and be truthful with me, and we'll work it out as a family. And you see that difference in the ER when there's a parent screaming at their child in the way that they shut down versus, someone that's communicating and making them feel like their health and safety is first. The punishment or the behavioral modification can come after, but they need to feel supported in that moment and in that time and space, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing too how much of this stuff comes up during the holidays. Like whether you have relatives that are either extra careful or they're sick, or relatives that aren't vaccinated, and there's like all this different. Everybody has different family scenarios that kind of the kids know about and they have to handle. So. And I just want to mention that the next webinar next week is going to be about traffic safety. So that's another thing to keep in mind for our listeners. Now the next question is something that I'm definitely concerned about. As kids get older, they spend more and more time away from home. And I want to ask the panel, how much do kids mimic what they see at home? Monica, do you have something to share on that?
Yeah, so we know that children learn from mimicking, right? They mimic everything. They learn communication patterns. They learn how to speak, right? By mimicking what they see as a growing child. And, if there's something you expect even of your children when they are with you or not with you, sometimes that comes back to the types of things that they see. And so, if we're thinking this even from a technology perspective, right? And you're expecting your children to not spend so much time on a phone or not spend so much time with a tablet, it's also a good opportunity to reflect what your own behavior looks like, right? How much time am I really on my phone? Or how close is it to me? Can I reach it from where I'm sitting all the time? Or do I really go along with our norms as a family and put my phone in the box before we sit down to the table too? Or am I the exception to the rule? So when we think about all the things that kids mimic at what they see at home and whether they leave and participate in those same behaviors, there's often a good opportunity for us to be reflective in those moments too.
Anyone else want to address this?
As Monica was talking, I was just giggling a little bit inside, because as a parent of 4, there's been a few times in my life where I've heard my children say to me, "Yeah, but you," or "Yeah, but mom." And you're like, oh, that's right. I did do that. I did say that, right? So they're always watching, right? And parents are their child's first teacher. And so they watch, they listen, they learn, and we have a choice and we have a responsibility as parents and then as professionals, especially myself as a building principal, to hopefully do what's right on a daily basis in my interactions with families, with students. But as important, or even more important, my 4 children at home, I always tell them I want them to be respectful, responsible, safe, and friendly citizens, like make a difference in the world. And so I have to model that type of behavior when I'm doing my professional job, but also personally in a variety of the things we do in our lives, because we definitely don't want them to use our own behaviors against us, but we want them to learn the best of what we know and who we are, and then take that out into society and hopefully become a positive statistic in the world, not a negative one.
Yeah, I think of that old adage, do as I say, not as I do, but sometimes I also say the wrong things. And Melody, I was wondering if you had anything you could speak on in terms of word choice and the things we say that our kids repeat.
Sure. Yes, definitely modeling behaviors is the strongest way to teach, because they are observers. Just in nature, we see, we do. So if you want them to do something, showing them that, so including things that are positive, but also negative. If you make a mistake, it's okay to say that, right? I messed up, and we can solve that. We can see this as an opportunity to learn, but our word choices do matter too. If we're yelling and we're telling them not to yell, we're actually making that an okay way to have a conversation. We're still modeling that. So sometimes we get in these heated moments and don't yell at me, but they're like, well, you're yelling at me. And so checking ourselves a little bit too with our tone of voice, the eye contact, those nonverbal cues, really getting down to their level, a nice touch on their shoulder, connecting before correcting. If we are having some moments where we need to talk about certain things, can really help to kind of ease the stress, take a few minutes for ourselves to take a deep breath before we approach. So I always like to say to try to respond before reacting, instead of reacting, actually, so that you're giving them a response versus a reaction. And so we want to try to model that tone of voice too, because then that does open the door of conversation. Also, when we are stressed or there are a lot of things that we want to address, we kind of get into this fix mentality. So we're only pointing out the negative things. So if they've done something right, or you see that they're doing something, mention that, because it takes more effort to actually say that we saw them do something that we appreciated. So taking the time and just bringing that into our awareness more. How much in a day am I telling my kid what to do? Grab your coat, grab your this, you forgot your that, why didn't you pick up your toys? Why didn't you, text me back? Like all these things where they're just getting so overwhelmed. It almost now, unfortunately, becomes a little shocking to hear, I love you, and you're doing a fantastic job. I saw how much work you put into that today, and that was awesome. High five. And it just lightens the mood, So just bringing that into our awareness, weaving in more of, what we would like to see them do, being very clear in our communication versus what we don't want to see, because that can really help direct conversations as well. And also build that really key ingredient of relationship building. So not every moment has to be a lecture. Not every moment has to be, where were you? What were you doing? Right? So genuine curiosity and asking questions, what and how questions versus why, and really having some deeper, more meaningful conversations there, so that relationship piece is built, because once that connection is there, then we can move into some of the other parts as well.
Okay. And, in terms of the actions and words that our kids see in relation to alcohol, that's been an ongoing conversation, I know, in our family for the last almost 2 years. But at the holidays, it's always more heightened because of parties and things like that. Katie, what kind of insight do you have in terms of modeling good behavior related to alcohol for kids?
I think it's so important, whether you see something positive or you see something negative, that you appreciate there's a teaching moment in both. And not everything has to be a positive teaching moment, but rather you can see something that maybe might make your child uncomfortable, or maybe might make you uncomfortable, and utilize that as a teaching moment to teach them what to do or how to navigate that situation differently, right? So especially during the holidays, you might see an uncle or a cousin that's vaping or, or drinking too much or, acting out of character. And in those moments at their developmental level, you can utilize that in order to teach them, what would you do differently? Or this is what we want to learn from this, or what we can pull out of it, and open up those very valuable opportunities to teach them what not to do and how to address it differently. And so what I would say is, like, I always tell my sisters and everyone, like, there's so many teaching moments. There's teaching moments everywhere you turn, and utilizing those moments to teach your child what they should or shouldn't do, or how they can, or talk to them about it and get down to their level and really address how they should interpret it, or how they could to try it differently, how that makes them feel, if they have any questions, is really, really important, because, sometimes those things can be very jarring to them and can look very scary, and they might have a lot of questions. So sometimes you got to open up that door and say, hey, I know you saw that. How did that make you feel? And then say to them, what would we do differently? Or why was that not the right way to handle that? And I think that, unfortunately, moving into the holiday season, when we do have a lot of emotion, and it is like no other time that we've kind of dealt with the pandemic, just being in tune with your child and seeing how their environment's affecting them is really, really important.
The last question we have, do anybody else have anything else on that topic before we move on? The last question, for older kids, parents may feel more lenient to give their kids a longer leash, to enforce fewer rules, because they've lost out on so much during the pandemic. What strategies can parents use to ensure values and safety? Why don't you share something with us?
Yeah, so this is a really big topic too, because they really actually have missed out on a lot, even though we have tried to, make up for lost time. And we might be seeing, and I've noticed a lot, that there is this sense of urgency, like, well, what if everything else closes down again? Or I didn't get to see, so I kind of need to catch up because I didn't get to see my friends during all that time. And especially in the adolescent phase, peers just are really the top of the line priority. So having that connection or not having that connection is really important to kind of tap into, because some are having a little bit of a hard time easing back into being in person places, whereas others are like, I've got to do everything. They'll drop everything if someone says we're going to do something, right? So again, coming back to that validation piece with them, they're urgent, right? Everything is extreme. If something happens with one friend or something doesn't occur, it's like everything has shut down. So validating that feeling, again, not dismissing how they are feeling with something. I know how hard this can be for you. I know it's difficult when things don't work out. And let's talk about what we can do, what we can control versus what we can't. So I think it's a great time to have those conversations and talking about recreating or creating, ways that are safe, that what can we do in this moment? What can we talk about? What have you seen, right? And involving them in that process again is really, really critical. So they've missed out on graduations, on proms, on vacations, socialization opportunities. And so again, they might want to really make it more extreme. So the more involved we can be by offering to take them where they're going, host something at your own home, and have them invite their friends over, just to kind of get warmed back up to everything again, can really be helpful. But there are a lot of kids too that are experiencing difficulty socializing again, and kind of being in person and being around people too. So being aware of kind of what we're contributing to that as well, and saying, oh, it's not a big deal. And if we're bringing stress to an event or whatever, we're carrying that with us. And also they're sensing all of that as well.
Thank you. It's amazing that the way this has affected the things kids miss out on. I know my son decided didn't want to do basketball this year because parents weren't going to be allowed to come to the games. That was something that I didn't realize was that important to him. But James, as an educator and a parent, you know firsthand what the kids are missing out on. What can you share on this?
That's my oldest son, Cody. His birthday's today, by the way. He's 20. He was a senior in high school the spring of 2020 when we basically shut down the world due to COVID. So he missed out on prom, senior prom. He missed out on an in-person graduation and all those things that are really celebratory, for kids in their senior year here. So that was an interesting time to kind of navigate with him. And then his freshman year of college last year was all virtual. The university he attends had no in-person classes for, and rightfully so, for freshmen. So he was at home learning too. So it was just a continued process of this lockdown at a time when kids are ready to kind of spread their wings and grow. And so once again, kind of getting back to listening, right? And just being a really good listener. I'm not him. I wasn't 18 years old. I didn't have that experience, right? And so navigating the world and that lockdown and the uncertainty of everyone's health, that was pretty big for him. It was big for everybody, but for that age group, it was really tough. Now, thankfully, they do have technology and social media where they were able to stay in touch with, their friends and with families and keep those kind of connections going, which was very helpful. As I kind of fast forward to this school year, we have a number of kids, especially kindergartners, who have never been in school until this year. So they were at home the spring of 2020 when they were 4Kers. Their learning was virtual as well, or parents kept them at home because they just felt it was safer. So their first experience being in school now with other kids is in kindergarten. And we've got a number of kids at different grade levels who that's been their experience too. So, they were in first grade or they're in second grade, and now they're coming back to us in fourth grade. And this is the first time they're back around their peers again. So talk about anxiety, talk about having to figure out social norms and how to do school. It's been really, really tricky. And you have kids who are shutting down, and then you have kids who are acting out, right? So the key in those situations for us as parents and as educators is just to be understanding. We're always talking about restorative practices, and you can always give punitive, right? There are consequences for some things. There just are in this world, right? But it's really important for us as professionals, as educators, as parents to really understand, like, this is a time like no other. And how we may have conducted ourselves as parents or professionals pre-pandemic, that isn't going to work anymore, right? And if we want to ensure that people do the right thing, and once again, we're seeing a rise in school violence, a shooting, right, just this week in Michigan, where who knows what the motivation for that child was, but we know that the world is stressful on a daily basis. The last year and a half has made it even more stressful. We have to be willing to listen to each other and to teach strategies that are going to help kids hopefully make good decisions and understand that nobody's perfect. And we've said kids will test limits because they're kids. But let's try to work together. Let's try to listen, provide them the supports they need. And hopefully this generation will become better than what the last couple of years have presented to them.
Well, I really appreciate everyone. I want to ask one final question. What's the one takeaway you want to leave everyone with? And Katie, I'm going to put you on the spot first.
Yeah, I would say the best advice I can give, anyone that's watching this webinar is, really it's about communication and making sure that you have a healthy relationship with your child and that they feel like you're a safe person to come and talk to. And I think really establishing that relationship and doing it in a time frame that is a low stressful time, meaning like in the car line or right before they go to bed, doing highs and lows, doing it in a way that's non-intimidating is really important, and starting as early as you possibly can talking to them about healthy habits and their body, and, really educating them on health and wellness is really, really important. And healthy decisions, good decision-making is really, really important.
Monica, how about you?
So my one big thing would be to set intentions over this holiday break that are attainable. So even something that can make an impact, like being a bit more mindful about your personal technology use and what you're modeling for your children, can make a big difference.
Me too. Yeah, technology use. I feel seen. Melody, how about you?
I would say the communication piece is huge in relationship, but also just thinking about moving away from this mindset of things need to be fixed or put back in place to how they were, and more towards, from this point, what do we really want to create with our families? And there's so much noise around us. There's so much of what this family's doing and what this family's not doing. And there's just a lot of comparison. So I would say just kind of come back to your sphere, your family. Think about what works best for you. What is responsibility in your family? What does that look like? And really coming up with those together, and trying to kind of close out what's going on around, because there's just so much that can distract us. And really what matters is, how are our children feeling? What are they experiencing? And how can we best support them?
Did you, this can kind of be for anybody, it makes me think, do you think social and emotional learning should be mandated in all the schools to help with mental health of the students? That's kind of for anybody.
We do it here in the Hamilton School District. So interesting, just the world in general. There are a number of groups or people out there who believe that when you're teaching social emotional learning, you've got another agenda. And I've seen people tie social emotional learning to critical race theory and other things that have become political hotbeds. Absolutely. I think now more than ever, we as adults need to focus on social emotional learning and social emotional wellness on a daily basis. And if we can instill and teach kids strategies to be their own best teacher and learn to comfort themselves in time of trauma. And then also, once again, getting back to, that family philosophy of recognizing others need support and others need help, and being selfless versus selfish, the world's going to become a better place, no matter what pandemic or trauma we're all going through. And when you were asking about final thoughts, right? I always want my students to remember that every day is a gift. And when we're talking about being responsible, what are you going to do today to make this day in this world a better place? And that hopefully tomorrow you can get back up and do the same thing again, right? So those things need to be explicitly taught to our children, and we as adults need to take them very seriously as well. So yes, mandated, encouraged, however you want to say it, it's important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it would make the whole experience of school better anyway, not just something like that. Well, I really appreciate everybody. I know I've got a lot of, I'm going to go back and listen to all this and take a lot of notes, a lot of practice to do. Erin, going to take over?
Yes, thank you. Katie, did you want to say one more thing? I see your hand up.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Me? No, I'm good. I mean,
okay. Perfect.
But I'm fine.
With that, I do want to say thank you, of course, to all of our panelists. I took copious notes, and I'll be writing them up. They'll be used with my 10-year-old and 12-year-old throughout the holiday season. I promise you that. I did want to let everyone know that since this is the first in our webinar series, our next webinar is next Thursday, which is the 9th at 12:30 Eastern. So again, bring your lunch, bring your coffee if you're on the West Coast, bring a snack if you're in the middle. And we're going to be talking about being safe and sound and responsible. So we'll have our traffic safety and government affairs team here. We will talk about holiday travel, keeping our roads safe. Our roads, unfortunately, someone asked about DUIs and just safe road conditions, that has deteriorated. And what are people doing? What can we do to be safe, whether we're traveling long distances or whether we're just traveling to and from a holiday party, work, or anything that we're doing over the next couple weeks. So again, I do want to thank everyone for attending today. I want to thank all of our panelists. Brent, I thought you did a great job as moderator, so thank you so much. And everyone, I hope that your holiday season is merry and bright and responsible. Thank you.